الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وبعد. So this inshallah should be the last session of this حلقة explaining the book of Sheikh Abd ar-Rahman al-Sa'di rahimahullah, الوسائل المفيدة للحياة السعيدة, the beneficial means to a happy and tranquil life. The book contains a lot of practical advice, but it's easy to take it just as a theory and not implement it. All the advice that the Sheikh shared in this book actually have a lot of potential once they are implemented to really change the quality of one's life. These advice are quite powerful and practical, but it seems, we seem to be stuck within a frame of theory, because theory is convenient. To know something in your mind, Imam Ibn al-Qayyim says, knowing something or al-ilm is upon two levels, or at two levels. One level is what we call theoretical knowledge, is that you know something in your head, but that's it. You just know it as information, inactive information. But he says there's another level of knowledge where that kind of knowledge propels you to action and you actually utilize what you know. And that's when knowledge becomes fruitful. Ibn Taymiyyah has a term for this. He coined a term for this. He calls it al-ilm ad-da'i. Al-ilm ad-da'i. He says it's the knowledge that propels you to action. The nature of this knowledge is that it propels you to action. So a lot of people seem to be stuck in that trap of focusing so much in theory without making use of knowledge, and turning it into a lifestyle. And that's when knowledge is beneficial, is when you act on it, when it becomes part and parcel of your conduct, rather than keeping it captive to your mind without utilizing it. So we're concluding with the book, and the Shaykh gives some powerful advice towards the end. There's 4 strong pieces of advice. So as usual, I will read them in Arabic, the first one in Arabic, then I'll explain it. And this might come as a challenge to many people. The first one we will share today is actually very powerful, and it takes a lot of wisdom to implement it. He says, وَمِن دَوَاعِ الرَّاحَةِ أَخْذُ الْفَضَائِلِ وَالْعَمَلُ عَلَيْهَا بِحَسَبِ الدَّاعِي النَّفْسِيِّ دُونَ التَّكَلُّفِ الَّذِي يُقْلِقُكَ. This is a very powerful statement. He is basically saying, one of the things that bring about ease and comfort in life is to handle virtues and great things based on your natural inclinations and tendencies. So you should listen to where your heart is actually guiding you. So he's saying, don't take all virtues at once. You need to be selective. In the sense, you have to sense out your heart. What is it leaning to? What is it more excited about? And these are the things that you should actually start doing. For some people, this is a taboo. What are you talking about? Because Islam is all about forcing yourself to do things. He's giving us the opposite advice. He's saying, and I'll repeat in Arabic and I'll also repeat it in English, وَمِن دَوَاعِ الرَّاحَةِ أَخْذُ الْفَضَائِلِ وَالْعَمَلُ عَلَيْهَا بِحَسَبِ الدَّاعِي النَّفْسِيِّ دُونَ التَّكَلُّفِ الَّذِي يُقْلِقُكَ. So one of the main causes of ease and peace is to handle virtues or approach them and to implement them based on the call of yourself. الداعي النفسي, what yourself is asking for, what yourself is excited about. دون التكلف, as opposed to pushing yourself. الذي يقلقك, that leads you to stress and anxiety. This seems to be contrary to what we have been taught, that you have to push yourself into things. That's what you're supposed to do. He is saying, no, that's not the way. He's saying you should listen to yourself. You should listen to your heart. Where is it taking you to? What is it hoping for and wishing for? And what is it excited about? Any of the good virtues? And that's what you should approach. That's what you should approach. And then he's explaining, he says, as opposed to pushing yourself into things because that will lead you to stress. Then he says, the consequence of pushing yourself is actually وَتَعُودُ عَلَى أَدْرَاجِكَ خَائِبًا مِنْ حُصُولِ الْفَضِيلَةِ. Then things will turn out to be that you would be disappointed, and you would not achieve the virtue that you have pushed yourself into. حَيْثُ سَلَكْتَ الطَّرِيقَ الْمُلْتَوِي. He says, because when you push yourself, you have taken the dodgy, dubious route to virtue. That's not the way to achieve virtue. حيث سلكت الطريق الملتوي. طريق الملتوي in Arabic means you have followed something that is fishy. It's not the right way to do things. It's a dodgy, dubious way or approach to things. That's not the way. What Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَأْتُوا الْبُيُوتَ مِنْ أَبْوَابِهَا, and approach things or houses through their doors, through the main door. He says, وَهَذَا مِنَ الْحِكْمَةِ, and this is part of wisdom. This is what wisdom is. وَأَن تَتَّخِذَ مِنَ الْأُمُورِ الْكَدِرَةِ أُمُورًا صَافِيَةً حُلْوَةً وَبِذَلِكَ يَزِيدُ صَفَاءُ اللَّذَّاتِ وَتَزُولُ الْأَقْدَارِ. And he says, and based on this, whatever bad things happen, disturbing things happen in life, that you manage to distill from each one of them the good things about them. So you turn calamities into opportunities. You turn hardships into some kind of ease by knowing how to read through it, how to see through it. He says, through this, inshallah, you'll achieve more of a pleasant life, and the things that disturb the rhythm of your life, inshallah, will be removed. Now let's talk about this a little bit. Oftentimes when you ask for advice from a teacher, from an imam, from a sheikh, he's going usually to tell you or show you the route that gets you to force yourself into things. Force yourself into things. And when you complain that this is hard, this is difficult, this is demanding, they say, well, where do you expect reward to come from? You have to push yourself into things. We seem to be programmed from a young age to do the things we hate. To do the things we hate. To push ourselves into things that are very hard, things we are not ready for. And we think this is the right way to do things. So people grow up with the intention, or with the impression, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants hardship for us. Allah wants the hard way for us, not the easy way for us. Sheikh Abd ar-Rahman al-Sa'di is saying quite the opposite. He is saying, in order to find ease in your life and tranquility and peace, when you approach virtues, and you say fada'il, the word fada'il in Arabic means virtues. It means all the teachings of Islam. These are fada'il, fadila. All of these are fada'il. So you approach them and implement them based on what? Based on what you are excited about, what you desire most. What you desire most. And I'm repeating this because, as I know, this is facing quite a rigid understanding of how to approach Islam. Is that basically find the difficult things and do them. Push yourself into things, and that's the way. He is saying no. He is saying when you approach good things or virtues, the teachings of Islam, you should actually listen to where your soul is leaning to. Where is it, trying to take you to? So what you find comes about easy for you, that's the way that you should actually take. That's the way that you should take. And he says, and it shouldn't be at-takalluf. At-takalluf is to force yourself into things. Force yourself into things. He says, because this brings about stress and anxiety, and then what it will lead to, ultimately, is that you will be disappointed because you won't achieve that virtue. That's not the way. Because you have used, or you have utilized or chosen the wrong way to approach it. The wrong way to approach it. And he says this is part and parcel of wisdom. Let's move on to the next point. Okay. I knew that there will be questions there. But okay. That's a very good, it's a very good question. And since we are the last session in the book, and we just have a couple of points, so I'll open the the platform for questions anytime. So the brother is actually making a very good point. What about the verse where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَأَمَّا مَنْ طَغَى وَآثَرَ الْحَيَاةَ الدُّنْيَا فَإِنَّ الْجَحِيمَ هِيَ الْمَأْوَى. Then وَأَمَّا مَنْ خَافَ مَقَامَ رَبِّهِ وَنَهَى النَّفْسَ عَنِ الْهَوَى. As the person who fears the greatness of his Lord, وَنَهَى النَّفْسَ عَنِ الْهَوَى, and held himself back or pushed himself back away from hawa, from its desires. فَإِنَّ الْجَنَّةَ هِيَ الْمَأْوَى. Then his abode and his resting place will be in paradise. So how do we reconcile between this point and the verse? The point that's mentioned in the book and the verse. Anyone can help us out there?
I was thinking about this, but the Sheikh mentioned for that word.
Excellent. The Sheikh created a context for that. He said when you approach virtues, so he's talking within the context of virtues. Within the context of virtues. Within the context of virtues, which ones to approach first? The ones that you find yourself inclined to naturally, more naturally. You see? So it's the context. So he created a context and he's talking within that context. So it's not in a general sense that you listen to whatever you wish, because that will obviously take you to the hellfire. So we're not talking about this. Jazakallah khair. Excellent. So he's talking about virtues here. So al-hawa is basically the evil desires of yourself. Absolutely you shouldn't listen to these. Absolutely, no one says that. But when it comes to the virtues, approaching goodness, what to start with? What to begin with? What should I take first? What are my priorities? You should sense yourself out. What are you naturally inclined to? That should be your priority. Start with this. Now this kind of understanding has always been, by the way, clear and obvious among the scholars. But just in recent times, it seems to be that this kind of wisdom has become a little bit forgotten. Like reading in Ibn Taymiyyah's Majmu' al-Fatawa, you will find often Sheikh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah is been asked about things to do. Like a person has, for example, 3 options, like at night. This question was probably answered 4 or 5 times in Ibn Taymiyyah's collection. He was asked this question. He said, which actions is better for me to do at night? Is it reading salah, qiyam al-layl? Or is it reciting Quran? Or is it just making dhikr, random dhikr? Subhanallah, alhamdulillah, astaghfirullah, etc. Which one should I do? He is saying there's an ideal state. He says ideally, salah, qiyam al-layl is the best. That's the highest reward. Qiyam al-layl is the highest reward. Second comes reciting Quran. And third or bottom, at the bottom of the list comes random dhikr in terms of reward. But he says, the person needs to sense his heart out. He says, عَلَى الْعَبْدِ أَنْ يَشُمَّ قَلْبَهُ. He has to sort of smell his heart. Where is it going to? Where is it leaning to? So if his heart finds itself so much enjoyment and continuity in reciting Quran, he should give it preference to praying at night, which is better. But he says reciting Quran for him will be better than standing up in prayer. Why? Because he loves it, so his heart will be in it, his focus will be in it, it will be of higher quality, and he would be able to sustain it. But if he pushes himself into salah, it would be heavy for him, he would be mainly absent-minded, he doesn't feel comfortable there, and he won't be able to sustain it, because he's pushed himself, he can only push himself, anyone can push themselves, only to a certain limit. Afterwards, it backfires. So he said that for some people, reciting Quran is actually better for them than praying. Why? Because, or even make a random dhikr. It's better for them because they feel it at a deeper level, they engage in it, and they are able to sustain it. But he says, but when you engage in what you love, of the virtues, of the good things, and you do enough of them, slowly, they start opening a new passageway for you into something else. So he says you might start, for example, with dhikr, if you like it so much, slowly, the more you do into it, it will take you by the hand into the Quran. So you will start finding more sweetness in the Quran, so you start to do it. You enjoy more the Quran, slowly, that might take you into the prayer, you'll start praying. Imam Ibn Hazm, he says in his book Jami' al-Akhlaq wa Siyar, very famous book of Ibn Hazm al-Andalusi from Al-Andalus, he says, من وجد في نفسه ميلا إلى علم من العلوم فلا يلتفت إلى غيره. He says, whoever finds within himself a strong leaning or a bent to a certain field of knowledge, let him not spend his time study something else. Let him not spend his time studying something else. He should focus on this knowledge. فلا يلتفت إلى غيره فيكون كزارع النارجيل في الأندلس والزيتون في الهند. He says, if you do this, if you approach something you don't like, a science that you don't like, and you leave what you like, he says you would be like someone who's trying to grow olives in India and it doesn't grow. Or who's trying to grow a coconut in Spain, in Andalus, and doesn't work. So he says, وَكُلُّ ذَلِكَ لَا يُنْبِتْ. And all of this does not give fruits. So we should read ourselves, we should know who we are in order to know how to manage ourselves within the religion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But this kind of haphazard approach, just delve into everything and do everything, this creates a lot of chaos in the heart. And usually people who do this, they won't be able to sustain the acts of worship they do. And the acts of worship they do won't be of a higher quality. And most of the time they would end up being just habits, dead actions that have no spirit, no soul in them. So these aspects are very important. We can see that our scholars are very well aware of this. But unfortunately you don't see this in schools being taught, you don't see this in the halaqat being taught as well. And even when you talk about these things, you will have some people in the crowd, they'll say, what are you talking about? All of this is ridiculous. And I've heard this. But these are issues that our scholars understood very well. Okay, any questions about this point? More questions about this specific point? So, yeah. Not based on what? Yes. I mean, Sheikh Islam Taymiyyah, really he addressed the point, because some people say, al-ajru ala qadr al-mashaqqa, that reward is proportionate to the level of difficulty that you're experiencing in doing the action. He's saying this works sometimes, like maybe with fasting, but this is not a general rule. He says it's not a general rule. Sometimes what you actually spend more effort in pays off less than another action. So he says you have to be careful, we have to be wise and strategic, in a sense, which action to choose, which to do. And this is what the scholars usually call fiqhu nafsin. Fiqhu nafsin. You understand yourself, and you understand the sharia, and you make very good choices as to what to engage in. The scholars usually call this fiqhu nafsin. So for example, oftentimes when Umar ibn Khattab was described, he's described with this word, kana lahu fiqhu nafsin. He had a very good understanding. He knows how to manage himself within Islam. He knows how to manage himself, how to navigate his way within, what Islam has to offer. So I think that's what you've been talking about. So it's not necessarily about effort. Ibn al-Qayyim, he talks a lot about, he says there are ways to Allah that are easy. He says there are ways to Allah that are easy, and there are no obstacles on these ways, and there are no highway robbers, no bandits who will block your way. He says, وَالسَّالِكُ إِلَى اللَّهِ عَلَى هَذِهِ الطَّرِيقِ. He's talking about one way to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is learning the names and attributes of Allah. He says, وَالسَّالِكُ إِلَى اللَّهِ عَلَى هَذَا الطَّرِيقِ مُسْتَلْقٍ عَلَى فِرَاشِهِ وَيَسْبِقُ غَيْرَهُ مِمَّنْ يَكِدُّ وَيَتْعَبُ. He says the person who approaches Allah based on understanding the names and attributes of Allah, and this is how he approaches Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He says this person is sort of lying on his bed, but he's covering more distance than people who are working day and night in worship. about something else, he's saying وَهَذَا طَرِيقٌ سَهْلٌ سَالِكٌ إِلَى الْجَنَّةِ قَلِيلٌ قُطَّاعُهُ مُوصِلٌ إِلَى اللَّهِ دُونَ كَدَرٍ وكثير من الناس مشغولون بغيره من الطرق مما فيه تعب وفيه كثير من قطاع الطرق. So he says, this is a way that is so easy, quick to paradise, and there is no interruption in it. Where he says most people are actually spending their time working really hard, choosing ways that are difficult, where there are highway robbers and bandits and obstacles, and they're struggling, but they still don't get the reward that the people get from following this path. So you have to be smart with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You have to be wise. You have to be wise. And look at the companions of the Prophet ﷺ. Each one they weren't all the same. They weren't all the same. Each one of them chose something different. So you will find some of them, for example, excelling in leadership in terms of armies. Wa alaykum salam. In terms of armies, and like Khalid ibn al-Walid, Abu Ubaidah, Amr bin al-Jarrah. But you will find some other companions actually focusing more on knowledge, like Abu Huraira radiyallahu anhu, Abdullah ibn Umar, Ibn Abbas. So each one of them chose something. Other companions really excelled in governance, like Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan radiyallahu anhu. He really excelled there. During the Khilaf of Abu Bakr, he was a wali for Abu Bakr, and he was a wali for Umar ibn al-Khattab. He was a governor in some areas, and he really excelled. And later on, when he became a Khalifa, he really excelled as well. So you can see that the companions actually, each one of them chose their own path to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala based on a very good understanding of who they are, or what their natural talents are, what their natural gifts are. And as I said, this kind of discourse, this kind of speech seems to be alien. And like some people would be like, what are you talking about? This is not Islam. Yes, because they've been, unfortunately, the other day I watched this video where there's a little kid that's learning Quran and his teacher is teaching him Quran and he's smacking him like on his head, on his back, on his thighs and everything. And the kid is crying out of pain. And once he makes a mistake, like he gets really beaten by his teacher. So unfortunately, this is the kind of attitude a lot of people are, maybe not necessarily as physical as that, but it seems like we have been told that Islam is about forcing yourself into things. Yes, you need to hold yourself back from desires, from hawa. You need to. But when it comes to virtues and fada'il and the beauties of Islam and the actions of Islam, you need to be very selective. And I'm not talking about selective between obligations. Obligations, you have to do them. You can't say, I don't find myself in prayer, I'm not going to pray the 5 daily prayers. We don't even need to mention this, by the way. It's so obvious, but it seems sometimes we need to make a disclaimer. Because some people you don't know where their thoughts go. So with things that are obligatory, you have to do them. Everyone has to do them. But now the virtues the majority of the virtues of Islam that are open, it's a matter of choice, that's where you need to be very strategic and very wise in how you choose to engage in them. Okay, let's move on to the next point. And he says, اجعل من الأمور النافعة أو اجعل الأمور النافعة نصب عينيك واعمل على تحقيقها ولا تلتفت إلى الأمور الضارة لتلهو بذلك عن الأسباب الجالبة للهم والحزن واستعن بالراحة وإجماع النفس أو وجمع النفس على الأعمال المهمة. So he says, basically keep at the forefront of your mind the things that are beneficial. And so this specific sentence is about managing your attention. Managing your attention. Where do you put your attention? So he's saying there are so many things where you can put your attention. Bad things that are happening, negative things here and there, challenging things. He's saying put your attention on the things that are beneficial. And obviously based on what he said previously, the things that are beneficial and you can do them, that are within your reach. So he says focus on these and وَعْمَلْ عَلَى تَحْقِيقِهَا, and do your best to achieve these good things. That's how you should approach life. And this actually is the advice of the Prophet ﷺ, احرص على ما ينفعك واستعن بالله ولا تعجز. Be keen to get what is beneficial for you. Be keen. So Muslims are supposed to be, to seek their own benefit. There's nothing wrong with this. Seek your own interest. There's nothing wrong with this. as long as you do not violate the rights of Allah and the rights of other people. So احرص على ما ينفعك واستعن بالله ولا تعجز, and seek Allah's help ولا تعجز, and do not feel helpless. So you should, choose what to put your attention on, chase it with everything you can, and do not fall in despair, and seek Allah's help. As simple as that, simple formula, but very practical. Then he says, وَلَا تَلْتَفِتْ إِلَى الْأُمُورِ الضَّارَّةِ لِتَلْهُوَ بِذَلِكَ. Then he says, and do not turn your attention to things that are harmful, to things that are not working out, to things that are holding you back. Don't pay so much attention there. Yes, maybe you need to address them, but don't keep thinking about them. Don't let them consume your attention. He says, because this would actually distract you, or if you do this, this will actually take you away from the reasons or the causes of pain and anxiety and stress and so on and so forth. So he says, and it will actually gather your attention on things that are beneficial if you follow this advice. So here it's about managing attention. Where you focus, and this is why they say, where attention goes, energy flows. You activate in your life whatever you pay attention to. Problems, everyone has problems. But the people who really achieve a higher level of success are the ones who don't put so much attention on what's not working out, on what's failing, or what the problems are. They focus on solutions. People who usually fail and they stumble and they lag behind are the ones who keep thinking about the problems as opposed to thinking of the solutions. So it's where you put your attention to. Where you place your attention, that's the important thing. So place your attention on the things that are beneficial, the things you can change. There are things in your life, there are difficulties. So some of them you can do something about them, some of them you can't do anything about them. So what can you do? Focus on the ones that you can do something about and leave the other ones for later on. And there's a principle that's very well known, and I think it was mainly popularized by Stephen Covey. And he says you have two circles. Circle of influence and circle of concern and circle of influence. Circle of concern is basically the things that concern you. He says this is bigger, but the circle of influence where you can actually make a difference is smaller. So he says if you focus on your bigger circle of concern, you will be lost. You will be lost. But if you focus on your circle of influence where you can do something to change things, if you focus on that and let go of the others, slowly this circle would actually expand in order to cover your whole circle of influence. And that's what in Arabic the poet said, إِذَا لَمْ تَسْتَطِعْ شَيْئًا فَدَعْهُ وَجَاوِزْهُ إِلَى مَا تَسْتَطِيعُ. So if there is something you can't do or you can't do anything about, leave it and move on to something that you can do something about. It makes so much sense. But it seems practically or actually we're not doing it. Most of us are not doing it. We enjoy thinking and worrying about our problems. We enjoy ruminating and complaining about them. And it seems to give some kind of payoff, some kind of satisfaction, because humans love to feel that they are victim. And when you feel victim, you have all the excuses in the world. That gives you some comfort, but it's fake comfort. You say, things are so difficult for me, this person has wronged me, this is not working out, I've tried this in the past, it's not working out, so I've tried my best and things not working out, it's not my fault. That's an easy way to live, but it's going to take the barakah away from your life. Once you play victim, you don't have to be blamed. You feel comfortable, but it's a fake comfort. It's a delusion. But if you leave all of this behind, what you can't change, leave it, and focus on the things that you can change. Slowly, slowly things will start moving forward, without you even feeling how the momentum builds. The next point, and that's the one before the last, says وَمِنَ الْأُمُورِ النَّافِعَةِ حَسْمُ الْأَعْمَالِ فِي الْحَالِ والتفرغ في المستقبل لأن الأعمال إذا لم تحسم اجتمع عليك بقية الأعمال السابقة وانضافت إليها الأعمال اللاحقة فتشتد وطأتها. Beautiful advice. He's basically saying you need to be decisive and finish the work straight away. You do something, finish it. Don't leave the last bits of it incomplete and say, I will complete that later. That's a very common practice of people who don't achieve anything in their life, by the way. They do something, they do 80% of it, they leave the 20%. It's like, I'll leave it later, because they feel good about themselves. I've done 80%. Okay, the rest, the 20% remaining will be easy for me. So he's saying, don't ever do this. He says, one of the most beneficial things to do in life is actually to complete and finish whatever you're doing straight away. You have it, have a work, get it finished, and that's it. Get it over with, once and for all. So he says, and this will give you so much space and time to deal with future actions or future projects. You'll have enough time to deal with the new projects. Because he says, if you leave your works or your actions incomplete, that remaining part will still be lingering there, will be hanging there, and then you will have something new to do, and all of this will accumulate and will become a very burdensome task. It will be an overwhelming state. So he says, make sure you finish the work straight away and move on. Don't fall into this habit. So he says, فَإِذَا حَسَمْتَ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ بِوَقْتِهِ أتيت الأمور المستقبلة أو المستقبلة بقوة تفكير وقوة عمل. So if you do this, if you finish your works and you move on, then whatever comes to you, whatever obligations or projects come in the future, then you have full attention and mind to deal with them, and you have the ability to engage in them fully, instead of having to do a little bit here, a little bit there. That's a very powerful advice. Very powerful advice. So finish whatever you start, and then move on. Finish whatever you start. And the last point that he shares, he says, وَيَنْبَغِي أَن تَتَخَيَّرَ مِنَ الْأَعْمَالِ النَّافِعَةِ الْأَهَمَّ فَالْأَهَمَّ وميز بين ما تميل نفسك إليه وتشتد رغبتك فيه فإن ضده يحدث السآمة والملل والكدر. So he says, you should choose from among the good choices you have, the good things, the virtues that you want to do. You should choose the most important, then the least important. So it's a matter of prioritization. Prioritization, the ones that are most beneficial, the ones that are most important. So you have obligations, start with the obligations. Start with the obligations and finish them. Then you have things that you want to do on a voluntary basis. Things you want to volunteer to do. Things as a nafila. As a nafila. You want to do some nafila. So you choose the ones that are most beneficial for you. Most beneficial for you. Then he says, and you have to be able to tell the difference between ما تميل نفسك إليه, what yourself leans to, and you have a strong desire to engage in. So you need to be able to tell that and recognize it. Then he says, فَإِنَّ ضِدَّهُ يُحْدِثُ السَّآمَةَ وَالْمَلَلَ وَالْكَدَرَ. Because the opposite of this, anything that you don't find yourself leaning towards it, anything else will bring you boredom and al-kadar. How will we translate al-kadar? Yeah, you would have negative feelings, generally speaking, towards it. So the things that you are not naturally inclined to, or you don't have a strong desire to engage in, and these are virtues. We're talking within the circle of virtues, good things. A level of frustration, yes. So basically, if you don't find yourself leaning towards them, and you engage in them, and you leave the things that yourself wants to engage in, the good things, then what will happen? You will end up having boredom, frustration, and disorientation, some worry and some kind of disorientation. Subhanallah. Again, he's stressing the point that he mentioned previously. So that shows the importance of being able to read yourself. You need to be able to read yourself and choose wisely which actions to engage in. Once you're done with the obligations, anything beyond that scope, you need to be careful and strategic and wise as to how to choose them. And he says, وَاسْتَعِنْ عَلَى ذَلِكَ بِالْفِكْرِ الصَّحِيحِ وَالْمُشَاوَرَةِ. He says, seek help to do this, to achieve this goal, by thinking deeply, using good reason to really find out what to engage in, which actions are closer to you. You find yourself naturally inclined to them. They come to you naturally. And والمشاورة, and consultation. Ask people's advice, people who know you, people who've been through that experience, people who've been through what you want to engage in. I want to get into this project. Okay, it's a charitable project. Okay, I want to get involved in it. Ask the people who've been through that process. Maybe they will give you some details that will clarify things to you and give you the impression, oh, it's not what I thought it was. So maybe it's not actually for me. So consultation is helpful. Maybe consultation of people who know you. They know from your conduct what you actually like, what you are good at, and so on and so forth. So consultation is important. فَمَا نَدِمَ مَنِ اسْتَشَارَ. A person who resorts to consultation, he would never find regret. Because you're basically enriching your understanding with the understanding and insights of other people. وَدْرُسْ مَا تُرِيدُ فِعْلَهُ دَرْسًا دَقِيقًا. And whatever you want to do, study it carefully beforehand. Study it carefully. Make a feasibility study. Study it. You want to embark on a project. You want to embark on a marriage. You want to embark on a study, on a degree. You want to embark on a new profession, a new job. Or you want to embark on a new, volunteering kind of job. You want to volunteer into something. So study everything, study. Study it carefully, understand it very well before you jump in. Before you jump in, understand, because it might be too late and you would waste a lot of resources and a lot of time, and that would cause you a lot of stress. فإذا تحقق, so he says, وَدْرُسْ مَا تُرِيدُ فِعْلَهُ دَرْسًا دَقِيقًا فَإِذَا تَحَصَّلَتِ الْمَصْلَحَةُ وَعَزَمْتَ فَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُحِبُّ الْمُتَوَكِّلِينَ. So he says, if you study it well, and you are certain after the study that there's a lot of good in that, and that's what I want, he says, after that, make a firm intention, azm, make a firm intention, and put your trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, put your tawakkul and your reliance on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then inshallah move on. Indeed, Allah loves the ones who trust Him and rely on Him. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. That's how he finishes his book. That's how he finishes his book. So looking at this book, and written by a Muslim scholar, and he talks about how to live a happy life, how to live a tranquil life. He gives very valuable advice, very practical. They seem to be very simple, very straightforward, but if you follow them, you will see a lot of difference in your life. This book has been granted a lot of acceptance, by the way, in the Arabic language. It's been printed a lot. It's been distributed a lot. So it's been very beneficial. So I'm not aware of a good translation. There's a translation by Dr. Salih Salih. There's a translation by Dr. Salih Salih, and he calls it Useful Ways of Leading a Happy Life. Useful Ways of Leading a Happy Life. The translation is a little bit sometimes rigid. It feels more Arabic sometimes. But it's a good insight into the book anyway in English. I'm not aware of any other translation. It's not a big book. And the advice there, as I said, it's quite beneficial, quite practical, and it ties in nicely with Iman, and with Tawakkul, and with trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and in all of this. So we can see how through the works of our scholars sometimes, how our faith and how the teachings of Islam really translate into sometimes practical things that are suitable for our temporary life. So sometimes people have a rigid approach to Islam, and it just reflects the narrowness of their mind or the immaturity. It's oftentimes that the people speak before they are mature in Islam, before they are mature in the knowledge of Islam. So they arrive early at conclusions. And they think what they don't know is not the truth. Anything that they don't recognize and are unable to relate to, for them that's wrong. Now, if someone has been a scholar, has been studying Islam for 40, 50 years, and they're recognized by the scholars, and they've spent their time studying Islam and understanding it, and so on and so forth, maybe they can depend on their taste, yes, because their taste has been trained by Islam. And Islam has really come to a point where it started shaping their taste and their personal preferences. But for students of knowledge who've been studying for a couple of years, a couple of months, even a few years, even sometimes 10 years, 15 years, still it's too early. It's too early to arrive at conclusions based on your own personal preference, or I haven't heard this before. That doesn't show that this is not the case. Because these are things that are said by, as I said, by a scholar. And I know a lot of these things, there are so many Muslims who actually, if you share the stuff with them, they would have a lot of criticism against it. But once it comes from a very well-known scholar, which is Sheikh ar-Rahman al-Sa'di, who is the teacher of, the main teacher of Sheikh Muhammad bin Salih, Ibn Uthaymeen, now people have nothing to say. A lot of people have nothing to say, have no criticism. Whereas the Salaf, the early generations like Sufyan al-Thawri, he used to say, الحق لا يعرف بالرجال ولكن الرجال يعرفون بالحق. He says, the truth, it's not that it should come from this or that person. If it comes from that person, it's the truth. Okay, give me something from that person, it's the truth. From another person, it's not the truth. He says, no, that's not the way. He says, it's the truth that shows who the real men are. So the criterion is the truth, not human beings. Not human beings. And we know the famous hadith of the Prophet ﷺ where he placed Abu Huraira to be in charge and to protect the sadaqat, sadaqat al-fitr. They were collected in the masjid as dates and provision and things that to be given to the poor people. So they were kept in the masjid in order to be distributed just before Eid, just before the Salah of Eid. So Abu Huraira was protecting it and guarding it, and there's this man who comes to steal from it. First night, so he says, leave me and I will, I have children and so on and so forth. So 3 times he comes, Abu Huraira catches him. 3rd time Abu Huraira says to him, I'm not going to let you go this time. I will tie you here into the masjid until the Prophet ﷺ comes and sees you. He says, listen, I will teach you something that will protect you from shaitan, but let me go. So he said, what's this? He said, if you recite Ayatul Kursi in a night, لا يقربك فيها شيطان. Shaitan will not be able to come close to you. So Abu Huraira let him go. The Prophet ﷺ came, and Abu Huraira had informed him. So he said, ما فعل صاحبك الليلة. What did your friend or what did that man do tonight? He said he came tonight like every night, and he told me such and such. The Prophet ﷺ said, صدقك وهو كذوب. He told you the truth, although he's a liar. So even from shaitan, this was taken originally from shaitan, yet the Prophet ﷺ confirmed it. So the truth is the truth, regardless who it comes from. Regardless who it comes from. Whereas human beings, as Imam Malik rahimahullah said, كل يؤخذ من قوله ويرد إلا صاحب هذا القبر. Each one will have their words and their statements either accepted or rejected, because not everything I say is the truth, not everything any human being says is the truth, except for Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Except for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So this book is actually a good example of how our scholars dealt with contributions of non-Muslim writers and non-Muslim authors in the field of the humanities, generally, social sciences, self-help, self-development, etc., and so on and so forth. So this is a clear example of how our scholars handled this. So we said previously, for those who did not attend the early parts of it, is that was Sheikh ar-Rahman al-Sa'di, who was being treated from hypertension in Lebanon in the last stage of his life, that he read this book when he was in Lebanon, and it was a book written originally by Dale Carnegie, the American writer, in the 1940s, and was translated into Arabic. It was a big hit, bestseller. So the Sheikh read the Arabic translation, and he said, إِنَّ هَذَا رَجُلٌ مُنصِف. He says about Dale Carnegie, this is a man of justice, a sound judgment. This is a man who has good understanding. Then he says, this is a very good book. So he even gave this book to a few people to read, and he put it in the public library in Unayza, in his hometown, which was the library he founded. He had founded himself. So he put the book there for people to be able to borrow it and read it. Which book? The book of Dale Carnegie. Then the Sheikh later on, he wrote his own thoughts after he read the book. He wrote his own thoughts in the form of a small booklet, which he called The Beneficial Means to a Happy Life. So that's a very contemporary, clear example from a scholar, a very well-versed scholar, as to how to handle these issues. how to handle these issues. So if there's any questions, inshallah we'll take them in 5 minutes. We have 5 minutes for questions. So any questions about this, about something we mentioned in the book, something that's related to that? If not, we'll take some other questions. Anything?
So you were talking about truth, and no matter who it comes from, the truth is the truth. But if someone's known to be a liar, how do you know it's the truth? Abu Huraira had Prophet Muhammad ﷺ to affirm that this person is a liar.
Yeah.
He told the truth. How do people like you and I know?
Yeah, very good question. The truth is the truth, so regardless whoever it comes from. That doesn't mean you go and take the truth from anyone. Because when a person does not have enough knowledge, we're unable to tell if this is the truth or not. Because the people of falsehood have mixed their falsehood with some truth. And they have beautified their falsehood in a way that sometimes make you think, is this the truth or not? So the context we were talking about was not general, was just about being just. So if you are well versed in a field, you know the principles, you know the rules, and you have very good, thorough understanding of this field. So when something is being said about this, based on your knowledge, if you can judge, oh, this is actually a sound idea. Regardless who it comes from, you should affirm that idea that's actually good. But that doesn't mean a person who doesn't have good or thorough Islamic knowledge, or whatever comes, okay, that's good, let's take it. No. So there is a condition there. There is a condition. So not everything that's being said is the truth, but when you know the truth, based on the principles and the knowledge, now, regardless of who it comes from, it's the truth. That's what we're talking about. Yeah. But everyone needs to be careful who to take their religion from. Because someone who has a messed up understanding, distorted understanding of Islam, is going to lead you astray. It will lead you astray. Just like Ibn Sirin, rahimahullah, said, إِنَّ هَذَا الْعِلْمَ دِينٌ فَانظُرُوا عَمَّنْ تَأْخُذُونَ دِينَكُمْ. This knowledge of Islam that you study is deen. That's going to shape your deen, your relationship with Allah. So be careful who you take your religion from. It needs to be someone who studied Islam well, someone who knows Islam, someone who fears Allah as well. Someone who fears Allah, because there are people who study Islam, but they have succumbed to temptations. Or some people have studied Islam, but they have gone astray with certain things. So you need to be careful. You need to be careful. Yeah. Questions? General questions.
So men are not allowed to wear gold, of course.
Sorry?
Men are not allowed to wear gold in Islam. Does that mean actual gold, or even like fake, like gold plated? Is it the appearance of gold, or is it actual gold?
The ruling is originally, at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, there was no coating.
Okay.
So nothing that so the original ruling is for gold itself.
Okay.
It's for gold itself. And now, anything that's coated with gold, does that fall under the ruling? The majority of the scholars today say no. The majority of the scholars, but some scholars say as long as it has gold, it should be avoided altogether. Because the coating is still gold. It's a thin layer of gold, isn't it? For the most part, yes. Okay, if there's no questions, then inshallah we conclude the question. Yeah.
I have a question about the Mawlid. Is Mawlid acceptable?
The Mawlid acceptable? Okay, you mean celebration? Celebration of the Prophet ﷺ's birthday? We should ask ourselves a question. Is it a religious matter or not? Mawlid. Is it a religious matter or is it a worldly matter? Is it a worldly matter, like, for example, graduation? Like the birth of a child? Is it something similar to that? Celebrating the Prophet's birthday? To me, it sounds religious. It sounds religious, like a religious occasion. Okay, so now it's a religious matter. If someone says it's a dunya matter, then I don't see how that works out. It is a religious matter, because why are you celebrating the birthday of the Prophet ﷺ? So it's a religious matter. Religious matters, we should be careful that it has to come from the Prophet ﷺ. It has to be in the Quran or the Sunnah, practiced by the companions of the Prophet ﷺ. If not, we should not engage into it. So ask ourselves, Al-Mawlid, the birthday of the... First of all, no one knows for sure which day the Prophet ﷺ was born. No one knows for sure. The exact date is not known. It's Rabi'ul Awwal, but which day in Rabi'ul Awwal, it's not confirmed. There's a lot of differences. Some say the 9th, some say the 12th, some say the 14th, some say the 19th, some say the 21st. So there's a lot of dispute, and there's nothing to confirm. Because the Arabs never paid attention, like date of birth, that was not part of the culture of the Arabs. So people tried to work this out in hindsight, looking back at history, trying to figure out which day the Prophet ﷺ was born. But for the Arabs, they didn't care. Even the Hijrah, like, still there's some dispute as exactly when did the Hijrah start, like specifically. So they don't care about dates. They don't care about dates. So the exact date is not known. That's number two. So the first one, it's a religious matter. Religious matters, we should have something to establish it in the Quran, the Sunnah, or the actions of the companions, or at least the first 3 generations. Number two, the date is not confirmed. No one knows exactly when it is and what it is. And third, looking at the history of the Mawlid. The Mawlid, the earliest recorded instance of a Mawlid being celebrated was actually by Ad-Dawla Al-Ubaydiyya. They call it falsely Ad-Dawla Al-Fatimiyya in Egypt. Ad-Dawla Al-Fatimiyya. Yes, it's Ismaili Shias. Ismaili Shias. These are people who killed Muslims, considered Muslims to be kuffar. Yes. And basically, and these are the ones that Salah ad-Din fought. Salah ad-Din finished off their state in Egypt. And when he was fighting the people from Europe, the French and the German and the English, when he was fighting them, trying to kick them out of Palestine, out of Jerusalem, and to release al-Masjid al-Aqsa, he said, before we deal with these, we have to deal with the Al-Ubaydiyyin, these in Egypt. Because these are the ones who will backstab us. So he said, we need to finish those first before we are able to handle the others. So these are the ones we need to start with. So these are the ones who established this. They call themselves Al-Fatimiyyin, trying to attribute themselves to Fatima radiyallahu anha, the daughter of the Prophet ﷺ. But the reality, they are Ubaydiyyin. That's the reality of their name. They are Dawla Al-Ubaydiyya. So they are the ones, in the recorded history of Islam, these are the first ones who came up with this idea. So, and looking at the state of celebrating the Prophet's birthday, so that's the basic points. On top of this, you can look at how people celebrate it. Usually people celebrate it with singing and music, etc., and mixing between men and women, and there's a lot of stuff. So looking at all of these things, I personally would never want to celebrate it. Would never want to celebrate it. Looking at all of these things. Trying to keep my religion intact, I won't go into that. Yeah. Okay, Jazakumullah khair, wa sallallahu wa sallam ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. I'll take any questions later on, inshallah, because it's time for Isha.